What if you could lower the chances of bad things happening to you? Awful misfortunes of all kinds, including theft, hexes, fire, bad energy, malicious spirits, sickness, and even slander. Hi, I'm Molly, traditional witch and professional tarot card reader, and today I am going to teach you all about protection. Even some things that you might not think fall into the category of protection magic. Not only should you be practicing protection magic as part of your routine as a responsible occultist, but you should also be utilizing it ultimately to improve your life. Of course, there's no way to completely avoid every single bad thing in life from ever happening to you, but there is a way to lower your chances, especially when you are using your magic very specifically. This is intended to be kind of a crash course. I am going to get as detailed as possible in every one of these sections, but there's no way that I can cover each individual thing. If you have a kind of protection that you do in your practice that I don't mention, please leave it below so somebody else can find that. That being said, this is gonna be long, so get cozy, get a cup of coffee, something comfortable, grab a notebook, and let's get started. Today I will be splitting up this video into different sections, and the first thing that we are going to cover is why. Why do protection magic at all? Many witches and occultists will tell you that when you start doing magic, your energy changes and starts to attract different entities to you, both good and bad, like a moth to a flame. And they're not wrong, but that's not the only reason that you should be doing protection magic. In fact, protection really has a much more practical application. And what I mean by that is that you can apply protection magic to anything. Anything that you don't want to happen to you, anything that you need help forming a barrier between, you can utilize protection magic to aid you with. You probably face many threats just in everyday life. They don't have to be big, but something as simple as someone gossiping could completely ruin your reputation and your career. Someone breaking into your house and stealing your valuables could be a complete and total nightmare. Your house could burn down, you might be being harassed by someone who won't leave you alone and that the police won't help you with. Someone's subconscious jealousy directed at you could be having negative effects on your everyday life. Maybe you are the subject of a curse, or maybe you're a peasant in the Middle Ages and your number one opponent is the fox eating your flock. We all need protection from something, and there is a fix for that. To be a magical practitioner and not be practicing protection is simply to be leaving yourself open to a lot of negative things that you could probably avoid. Sometimes the unexpected happens in life. Actually, usually the unexpected happens in life. And as the saying goes, the best offense is a good defense. Now you might be wondering, how does protection magic work? Well, magic is largely the manipulation of energy through the will and the mind. The most basic protection magic works by forming a protective barrier around a person, place, or thing that keeps unwanted influences out. At this point, it's good to note that because protection is a barrier, you do need to cleanse before doing your protection so that you don't end up entrapping negative energy inside of whatever your protection is. But that is a completely different subject, so we are moving on. This barrier effect in protection magic is why a lot of the ingredients that you'll see that have correspondences to protection tend to form natural barriers in nature. Eggshells are a great example, as are thorny hedges. The idea is that the object itself is doing what it does in the physical world and essentially projecting that onto the energetic or spiritual world. But barriers are not the only kind of protection magic there is. Protection magic can also be done by sending something or someone away, stopping a behavior, or even diverting attention away from oneself in order to become invisible. Like any other kind of magic, protection magic does have many energetic correlations that you're going to want to work with when practicing protection, including planets, days of the week, numbers, herbs, and more. You can always do protection magic whenever you need to. However, the days of the week that coincide with planetary influences related to protection are usually going to be Tuesdays and Saturdays. The Tuesday relates to Mars, which is aggressive, the planet of war, defensive. Saturday has to do with Saturn, which is very binding and restricting. Saturn has to do with our limitations, and so we are able to limit a threat and also create a restriction or barrier to keep that threat from getting to us. Colors most often associated with protection are going to be red, black, and white. And the number that I usually use in my protection work is the number 9 because it does relate to Mars, but the numbers 3 and 4 will also work great. There are plenty of protective herbs, and this is where things start to get really specific. The herbs that you utilize in your protection workings can really get into the minute details of exactly what you are protecting yourself against. A good kind of general overall protection herb would be rosemary. A great herb for banishing evil or negative energy would be basil. I find echinacea to be a very Martian and very defensive herb. But when you get a little bit more detailed, things like a little bit of tansy or ragweed placed in your left shoe are folklorically known to protect from fever. Garlic can be used strategically to protect from psychic vampirism, also thieves. Rue is classic for protecting yourself from pesky ghosts. Angelica root can help to keep a curse at bay. Devil shoestring may protect you from the law. Slippery elm can help protect you from gossip. And my favorite, chicory, can help to protect you by aiding in works of invisibility. Let's get into the first and probably simplest method of protection, which is just energetic protection. You don't need anything for this except for a little bit of time, your mind, and the ability to conjure up some protective emotions. When you do energetic protection, you are essentially manipulating energy with nothing other than your mind. And this is actually a very overlooked and underrated way of protecting yourself. With enough concentration, this is actually super powerful. The most common use for energetic protection is, generally speaking, to protect yourself from negative energies. This can be really helpful if you are an empath, or if you are unfortunately working or living around people who don't have the best energy or maybe are actually working against you. The simplest energetic protection exercise that you can do is to ground yourself, connecting yourself with the earth, allowing all of the negativity inside of you to be released into the earth, and then pulling up some of the earth's energy for added power. You're then essentially just going to imagine yourself being filled with light, and that light eventually permeates the skin, forming kind of a thin layer over your person, and then that light expands into a circular, or I always think of an egg shape because eggs are also naturally protective. While I am visualizing this, I am setting my intention to build a protective shield around myself, and I keep going until I feel like this sort of auric shield is at about the consistency of a diamond. It would be impossible to penetrate. When you feel like your auric shield is really solid, you can then get creative with it. Some people might add spider webs to the outside to entangle any negative energies that are coming your way. It's really up to you. Whatever you feel like you intuitively need in that moment, you can add to your auric shield, and this does work really well. By the way, if you are around a lot of other people who are practicing in the occult, having good energetic protection doesn't just protect you from other people's bad vibes that you're soaking up. It could potentially be a great last line of defense against, say, a curse or a hex or something like that. Similar to energetic protection is verbal protection. Yes, the words that you say are magic spells, and the more that you believe them, add energy to them, and time them with planetary hours, the more powerful they will be. And this does apply to protection. Now, as a witch, this is not the only way that I would protect myself, but there's nothing wrong with adding a little verbal boost to your protection. Your verbal protection does not have to be vague. It can be very specific. This doesn't have to be a particular verbal spell that you get from a book. Your verbal protections can essentially be prayer or something that you make up yourself. The key is to really feel the words that you are saying, and any visualization that you're able to add will just strengthen your words. Next, we're talking about warding. Warding your home and warding yourself. Warding is a protective act of creating physical defenses to shield a person, place, or thing from any kind of harm. Wards are really useful because they are a constantly working, ongoing form of magic. You make a ward, and the idea is that it keeps working until it breaks or runs out of power. One really old school protection ward is witch marks. Witch marks are symbols that can be carved into or drawn on homes for the purpose of entangling and entrapping bad spirits, protecting from fire, protecting from theft. Essentially, you're just taking the symbol of the kind of protection that you want and you're just slapping it on your house. These were used predominantly to kind of tangle up the bad vibes, any malicious spirits that were coming in your way, so that they could go no further. Now, you could also do essentially the same thing by using runes, but if you don't want to create a permanent witch mark on your place of residence, you can use a chalk pen and simply draw it around any entrance that you think needs some protection. You may benefit from creating a little ritual to go with this. I would definitely incorporate a little bit of spoken word. I would probably want to do this on a Tuesday, but even just a little bit of visualization and intention while warding your house like this will go a long way. A famous ward to protect from fire is the Breed's Cross. Breed is the pagan goddess of hearth, home, fire, smithwork, poetry, milk, all kinds of stuff. And so the idea of the Breed's Cross is that you gather reeds or tall grass on January 31st, and then you construct your Breed's Cross on February 1st, welcoming the goddess in, asking for her blessing to protect your home from fire, and then burning the old cross to ensure one more year of no fire in your home. Now, there are not a lot of reeds or tall grass where I live, so for convenience sake, I usually make mine out of pipe cleaners, which means I will not be burning it every single year, but for all intents and purposes, it works the same. Speaking of protective wards that you hang in your house, this would not be a protection magic video if I did not talk about iron. Iron is probably one of the most important things when it comes to warding your house. And the mother of all protection ward charms is probably the horseshoe. Horseshoe charms act as kind of a multitasking ward. It not only keeps out bad energy or malicious spirits, threats, whatever you don't want, but it also brings in good luck. There are a lot of different rituals in which different traditions will make their horseshoe charms, ranging from elaborate to fairly simple. I've seen some people say that the horseshoe should have the open end up. I've seen some people say the open end should be down, but essentially you would pick some kind of a ritual to designate your horseshoe as a magical item. And then what I do is I nail it above the entryways of my home. And as I'm nailing it, I am saying a magical spell until it is completely nailed in. One thing to note about the iron horseshoe, while iron itself is great because it does get rid of negative influences, you are going to want to get a used horseshoe. And they're actually not hard to find and they're not expensive. I found mine on Etsy as I am not an equestrian and do not have regular access to horses. Hagstones are another really great ward that I do not want to skip, and the reason for that is that they are so versatile. These are some hagstones that I made into a protective ward for my house. And as you can see, a hagstone, if you don't know what it is, it's just a little stone that has a naturally occurring hole inside. The idea is that whatever threat that you don't want entering your house would have to pass through one of these holes and would not be able to enter or would get stuck. Now, this is a really traditional ward that incorporates red thread, 9 hagstones, and 9 knots. So this is also a use of knot magic, which is a whole nother subject. But this is not the only way that you can use hagstones. You can get one hagstone and tie it on a piece of red, black, white thread, whatever you have, and tie it together in a loop with a key, and that will essentially function the same way as this. Or you can make a hagstone charm and tie it above your bed to protect you from having nightmares. I actually really like hanging wards like this because they are so versatile. So if I wanted to, I could add a lot more to this. I could add a mirror shard to reflect negative influences back at the intruder, although I'm kind of skipping ahead. That's something I'm going to talk about in a minute. I could add dried protective herbs. Whatever you want, you can really add to this charm and it will work the same. If you are making a hagstone charm in order to protect yourself from having bad dreams, you might want to tie a little sprig of lavender on to aid you in not only being protected from bad dreams, but attracting good dreams. There are so many other kinds of wards that I frankly am just not going to have time to go into. You could make a seal, you could hide shoes at random places in your house. There are so many things you can do, crystals, but the last really proper ward I want to talk about is just making a powder and scattering it in a literal boundary outside of the place that you live. If you live in an apartment, you can just do this around the entryways of your home, but a good cascarilla or ground up eggshells combined with a little bit of red pepper flakes and maybe some salt is an excellent protection method to keep anything unwanted from crossing that barrier into your home. And this is where we see that barrier magic, right? You're creating a literal barrier with protection related items, and that is creating a spiritual barrier between the outside world and your home. Amulets are items that you wear on your person to protect you from harm. Common amulets include pentacle necklaces, bracelets with certain crystals on them, things like evil eye charms, hamsa hands, or even a little sachet that's filled with protective herbs and perhaps a sigil. And this is again where we can actually get into more dual purpose protection methods. Things like a rabbit's foot can be used for good luck, but it can also be used for protection. But your amulet doesn't have to be any of those things. For the most part, you can make an amulet out of anything that has some protective quality to it. It could even be a necklace that has an animal that symbolizes protection on it. Just to bring up an example that I've already spoken about, you can actually protect yourself from slander and gossip by creating a symbol or using one that already exists like this and secretly wearing it on your person. And there are a lot of rituals to make effective talismans, but if you don't have a ritual and you just have a piece of jewelry that you want to kind of bring to life in a protective manner, the very basics of talisman creation is that you are going to want to time your working appropriately, introduce the item to all of the elements, and then let it sit in candle flame until the candle completely burns down. Candle spells are another great way to give yourself protection and possibly add a little bit of a boost to your magic, because the element of fire has the potential to make things work faster and to give your magic a little bit more power. One really easy protection spell that does not take anything super fancy and is completely customizable to your needs would be to take 9 different items, and by that I mean like herbs, maybe pins, eggshells, salt, whatever protective items that you have. Dress your candle in them after carving your need for protection into the candle, and then letting that candle burn down while you visualize your need for protection coming true. Doing candle workings for protection can also be highly beneficial, because instead of needing a physical item on the person, place, or thing that you are trying to protect, you can do it a little bit more astrally and do your protections in a long distance manner if you need to protect someone or something that you are not around. And because we are talking about candle magic, this brings me very naturally to baneful protections. Sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do. Baneful protections are magical protective workings that may have adverse effects on the intended target, or rather the person or entity who caused the harm in the first place. This includes, but is not limited to, banishings, return to senders, bindings, and even dominations. Now, why would you want to do a baneful protection working? Well, probably you don't actually want to, but even if your protections are really strong, you may run into a situation where somebody will not stop pushing you and you have to take action. The most common case of this that I have seen is people who have an abusive ex who will not leave them alone, and the police will not help them out. I'm a big proponent of doing everything that you can in the physical world first, but ultimately, when it comes down to extremely unfortunate situations, sometimes you have to take hold of your power in a less than pleasant way. And I think before we go any further into this topic, I just want to remind people that a lot of this kind of magic was originally created by very disempowered people who did not have the ability to get out of bad situations and had to do what was in their toolbox. Now, banishings, bindings, and domination need their own video, but I am going to talk about one specific protection item that you can use as a return to sender, and that is the famous witch bottle. Now, witch bottles are probably about as old-timey as it gets. I am showing you one of my witch bottles because I don't want to show you all of my defenses, but you put some protective herbs inside of your witch bottle, some sharp objects. I use bent pins, maybe some really hot items like spicy chili peppers. You could use thorns, your petition, a tag lock, and some red thread. Now, the return to sender part of this is when you add a little mirror shard into your witch bottle, and maybe some other things that are associated with return to sender work, such as crab shell or vetiver. If you look up the tradition of making witch bottles, it can get a little bit gross. The really old school witches use urine. I do not do that. The main purpose of having a tag lock inside of your witch bottle is to confuse any negative forces that someone else has aimed at you and have it hit the bottle instead. And the combination of sharp items as well as the mirror shard both sends it back to the perpetrator and makes it sting a little bit. You want to put your witch bottle close enough to you that the threat aimed at you will already be coming in that direction, but at the same time, you also want it slightly away from your person. Traditionally, people would put witch bottles inside of the walls, bury it on the property. If you can't do any of that, putting it inside of a flower pot is perfectly fine, as long as it is out of sight, out of mind. When a threat has been adequately dealt with, your bottle may break, signaling that it's time to make a new one. There are plenty of other ways that you can launch a counterattack or reflect harm back at the original perpetrator. However, this is just a really classic example of a return to sender style ward that you can have on guard at all times. The last magical protection method that I am going to talk about in this video is simply to ask the spirits that you work with for protection. And that can pretty much be that simple. Let's say you're working with an ancestor. Chances are they're already protecting you even if you don't see it, or they might warn you of incoming issues. But if you wanted to take this the next step further, you could petition them for protection. To do this, all you really need to do is get an offering ready, write a petition, light a candle, welcome in said spirit, and ask for protection while lighting the candle and then giving them said offering. Chances are, if you are already working with an entity and they know you pretty well, they're gonna be happy to help protect you in the way that you need. If you don't work with spirits yet and you want to start by working with someone who can give you protection, there are a lot of popular spirits out there specifically for protection. You can also take this one step further, and let's say you're working with a spirit, I'm just going to say an ancestor, and you want them to guard a certain portal to your home. One way to do this would be to pick an ancestor who has some protective quality to them. Maybe you have an ancestor who was in the military. That's probably somebody great for guarding your front door. You could petition them for protection and then place their altar or a small effigy that you have designated for them near the front door, and boom, you have a spirit guarding your house. Now for the best part, I am simply going to read you a couple of spells from this book that are very unique and frankly just interest me because they don't really relate to a lot of the things that we deal with in modern times. For protection, if you meet a bear, say the following verse. You are bear, I am man. You were not baptized at the same fonts as me. You should flee into the forest and bite the trees, but don't bite me at all. Spell for dulling your enemy's sword. Ophusa, o amplustra, o geministra. In nomine Patris, Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. Okay, this one I am gonna use. It's not actually that random. This is protection of the garden. On certain days of the year, touch the herbs and vegetables of the garden to prevent ants, grasshoppers, snails, caterpillars, worms, and other insects from bothering them. I know what I'm doing in the spring. Thank you so much for watching my video. I hope that you enjoyed it, learned something from it, and can take one of my tips and put it into action. I love reading everybody's comments. If you have any questions about something that I said in this video, please comment below and I will do my best to answer you. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you again soon. Bye-bye.